American boy fell into the river to save his aunt. 32 years later, he woke up in a rice field in a mountain village in China. Faced with the unfamiliar language around him, the boy fainted. The local police then notified the U.S. Embassy. The boy was repatriated to China. He had no passport and no ID. The FBI speculated that the boy was kidnapped or trafficked, but there were no recent cases of missing persons on any continent. Only his name, Jacob, was found on his lapel. Customs agent Mike sent him home according to Jacob's memory, but the door was opened by an old man who was over 70 years old. While they were talking, Jacob jumped on him, shouting, "Dad!" He was shocked, because his son had drowned 32 years ago. He was buried by his own hands, but the old mother behind him immediately recognized her son. Looking at this strange and familiar face, the old lady cried her eyes out. At that moment, Jacob's uncle came to the door. Jacob suddenly had an epileptic seizure. The people took him to the hospital, but the nurse couldn't hear the boy's heartbeat. After checking, the stethoscope was reversed. Is it possible that the resurrection of the dead really exists? And why did he appear in China, just when everyone was wondering? The boy disappeared from the hospital. The old father searched around the town several times before finding him. The boy ran like crazy and the father chased after him. In the process, it was as if everything had gone back to a day 32 years ago. Jacob was still the same as before, but the old father was getting older by the day. Jacob ran to a hole in the tree and stopped, pulling out a soldier toy from the hole. At this time, the father was even more confused. This toy is the birthday present given to him by his father more than 30 years ago. After returning home, Jacob's meal became extremely large. One person can eat as much as 6 adults. His elderly mother chose to ignore all this bizarre behavior. She cooks for him and plays with him, as if everything was back 32 years ago. But the old father was very worried, because it was his own hands to help his son cover the coffin. Cannot remember wrong. Mike asked Jacob to remember what really happened at that time. Jacob only remembered that after he lost his footing and fell into the river, he saw a man dragging his aunt by the river. When he woke up again, he was already in the rice field. To find out what really happened, Agent Mike came up with a bold idea. Open Jacob's coffin. After many discussions with Jacob's parents, they also agreed in order to find out what really happened. So he opened Jacob's coffin. The two men were stunned to see the intact bones inside the coffin. The sweatshirt on the body was exactly the same as the one Jacob was wearing. If the one lying in the coffin is Jacob, then who is the boy in the house? Mike also took the collar plate to compare. Except for the old and new degree is exactly the same. What the hell is going on here? It doesn't make sense. The next day, the old mother took Jacob to the town park to play, but the parents on the sidelines called their children away. They thought Jacob was a monster. It seems that the boy's resurrection from the dead has sent the town into a panic. Late at night, the children of the town used flashlights to shine in Jacob's window. Jacob was so scared that he almost had another seizure. The old father rushed out to chase away the bad children, and at that moment there was a second person who came back from the dead in the town. His name is Keller, who died of a heart attack 13 years ago. Daughter Amy looked at the man in front of her and her age and hugged him. And Keller is Amy's father. Now there are two people who have come back from the dead. Mike's desire to find out the reason for this anomaly is growing stronger and stronger. Keller's son Frank has never believed the man who called himself his father. And sister Amy, for the dead back to the father, did not think too much. But this Keller is not simple. Only a few days after the resurrection to resist the hoe to dig in the woods. Do you think he is planting? Not. 13 years ago, he and his accomplices robbed a truck of money, buried all the money in the woods. But Keller has a serious heart condition. Just buried the money because too excited, heart attack. And now after the resurrection of Keller now only want to find the money back. But half a day of digging but saw nothing. It must have been taken away by the partners. Keller thought more and more angry. With a hammer, he went to his partner's house and hammered him to death. Then he used the same tactics he used 13 years ago to rob another money train. He wanted to leave the money to his beloved daughter Amy. But the law and order is different now. Before his daughter could get the money, he was surrounded by the FBI. The father's actions cost Amy her job. In the cell, Amy and her father had a big fight. After falling out with his daughter, Keller gradually lost his temper. In the moment when Mike turned around to pour water for him, Keller disappeared into thin air. Even if the surveillance cannot find any clues, Pastor Tom followed the sounds of the commotion to the church. He saw a woman sitting inside the church, and when he walked over to her, he realized, wasn't it his first love who had died? Lisa didn't believe she was dead. She cut herself on her leg. Yes, she was bleeding like a normal person. Everyone in the town is now afraid of the strange things that have happened. Tom had to take his first love, Lisa, to the church basement and hide her. When he gets home, he tells his wife about it. Her husband suddenly appears to have a girlfriend, which leaves her at a loss. Lisa comes back to the place where she started with Tom. She regrets the suicide she committed. Now her greatest fear is to die and lose Tom again. The loss of those closest to her only brings pain to those left behind. Tom did not want to experience this feeling again. She pulled up the person she once loved the most. Lisa came back feeling unwell. Tom took her to see the doctor and the test results were normal. But when the doctor turned to the next page, on the face of all surprised, that is, Lisa is pregnant. This is the child of Lisa and Tom in a previous life. Lisa replicated what had happened in her previous life. Lisa was also very shocked. Tom's wife told the church warden about it. The church warden found Lisa and told her to leave Tom. Don't interfere in other people's marriages. She said that Lisa's belly was filled with demons. She thought Lisa was a demon, a person of ill luck, and wanted to judge these unlucky people in the church. The church was in chaos because of this. They have different views. Some thought it was a gift from God to bring back their loved ones. Others thought they were demons. Looking at Lisa, who walked in, Tom flatly admitted that she was his girlfriend. As a result, Tom lost his job as a pastor. Back home, Tom blamed his wife for telling others about Lisa. Just as he went to look for Lisa, she disappeared. A few men kidnapped Lisa under the guise of a federal detective. These people were trying to find out where these resurrectionists came from. But Lisa didn't know anything. Two detectives saw Lisa as a normal girl, so they planned to let her go. But one of them still refused to give up. He closed the door and continued to question Lisa. The man did not believe that Lisa was human. He felt that he had to use force to get this woman to tell the truth. But at that moment Lisa looked like a different person. Luckily, Agent Mike and his boyfriend Tom arrived in time, but the man took Lisa hostage and became very emotional. When the two sides were at a standstill, Isa turned around to grab the gun. The man shot Lisa in the abdomen. Tom was able to come back to life again, and once again watched Lisa leave. Not to mention the fact that he was carrying his own child in his belly. He held Lisa in his arms and cried out in pain. On the other hand, Jacob disappeared again. The old father drove around looking for him. Now the residents of the town are very unfriendly to the resurrectionists. This made the parents very worried. Finally they found Jacob in the jungle. Since Jacob could sense the other face is full of sadness. As the police chief, he had a huge conspiracy inside him at this time. The number of resurrectionists in town was increasing. The church was starting to outgrow the resurrectionists. The government sent the army to support the town, bringing many supplies. But then the sheriff's uncle pointed to Lisa to show the army chief. Then he took the chief to the morgue. Seeing this person who was alive 1 minute, the next second he was a cold body. He told the chief that these reanimated people are very dangerous. There was a murder committed by a reanimated man named Keller, and they had to be contained. Yes, this man was abandoned by his resurrected wife and his heart had begun to twist, then premeditated something with the chief. And then Jacob's father received a call from the police, said to bring the returned loved ones to the stadium for temporary documents. Agent Mike also heard the news and came. Seeing Jacob's family, Mike tells them that they don't need to come here to stand in line. He would help them deliver the documents. Then Jacob pointed to his good friend's family. Mike also understood the meaning. After calling Jacob's family away, Agent Mike found the family of 3. However, Mike did not know that the 3 people standing in front of him, his parents and sister, who died in a car accident when he was a child. Mike told his uncle's daughter about the incident. Daughter also cannot believe that this is actually their own father's work, but when she looked at her mother she understood everything. He wanted to revenge for her leaving. Mike pulled the fire alarm and the doors opened. He escaped outside with a large number of reanimated people. Uncle Sheriff saw the reanimated people escaping, ordered his officers to arrest everyone back. One of the officers began to question all this. After all, there were his own family inside, so he disobeyed the sheriff's order. At that moment, Mike returned to Jacob's home in a hurry and told the truth about what happened. Asked Jacob's family to flee the town quickly, but the old parents with their son will not be able to go far. The parents give Jacob to Mike, who was a federal agent. The old father looked at Mike with sincerity. Mike hurriedly took Jacob to the car. Just as they were leaving, the sheriff's uncle came to Jacob's door. The mother was very angry and gave this brother-in-law a slap on the face. The brother looked at the brother he no longer knew as his own and did not say anything more. On the other hand, Mike in the car noticed something unusual on the road, but when he got out of the car to check, the ground was covered with bedbugs. Just then a helicopter comes flying towards them. The mysterious troops that came with them surrounded the two of them. When he woke up again, he was in a green field. He vaguely remembers that the men had taken Jacob away from him. He rushes to Jacob's house. He cried and begged Jacob's parents to forgive him, but then Jacob came down unharmed. It had been more than a month since the incident. When he remembered, he could only vaguely remember. A mysterious person injected something into his body, but he could not remember anything else. What happened during this time? What is the purpose of this group of mysterious people? Could they be involved in the resurrection of the dead? And more people coming back to life. One day Jacob found his grandmother who had come back to life. And Jacob told her,
I died, but then I came back, just like you, Grandma.
And the old father saw his mother, who was younger than he was at that moment. Two embraced each other and cried. After the older son told his mother what the sheriff's brother had done, she found the second son. At this point he finally put aside all his strength in his mother's arms and cried bitterly. Agent Mike disappeared during this time. The government, in order not to cause a riot, the government only took away those who had no relatives in the town to revive them. In the town have family members left behind, but Mike always felt an inexplicable pain in his chest since his return. He went to the doctor to do a full body examination. The test results were normal. He always felt that someone was following him, so he prepared to pack his things and go back to hide. But then he heard a movement in his room. He goes over and turns on the light to find out that it is the mystery man who injected himself into his body. The mystery man knew that Mike knew something about reanimated people, so he asked him to help keep an eye on these reanimated people. But Mike didn't want to, so he questioned her. What was injected into his body that caused him to lose his memory? But he didn't know that the mystery man was here to check his own resurrection.
You can refuse, of course. We'll just put you with the rest of them.
Just as the mystery man was leaving, Mike suddenly remembered the scene when he and the strong man fought for the gun. He rushed to the mirror and pulled back his clothes. There was no wound on his chest, because he is now also a resurrected person. On the other hand, the resurrected grandmother asked her son to take her to the former family factory to see, but when she arrived at the factory, she found that it was in ruins. She scolded her son for not running the factory properly, but at that time, his mother and son had left one after another, so he had no desire to run it. At night, the grandmother grabbed a shovel and dug around the factory. When she dug it up, there were 5 decomposed bones. The next day, the pastor, who had gotten his job back, took the believers to the river for baptism. The woman suddenly felt something in the river and pulled it out to sea. When the doctor put together the 6 bones were found to be 3 people, and from the degree of decomposition of the bones have been decades. That is, Jacob is not the world's first resurrection of people, but decades ago there has been the existence of reanimated people. Tom's first girlfriend who died by suicide 11 years ago. Now she has come back to life. Tom brought his first love Lisa back to the place where he used to live with his wife. But Lisa sees everything in the room and thinks of Tom's wife. She was very uncomfortable and asked to leave, but for the sake of the baby in her belly, Tom persuaded her to stay. Tom's wife, Barbara, had already decided to leave Tom, but when she came home to pack her things, she cried when she saw Lisa's fetal test report. She could not have children herself. So why did this woman appear with a child? At this point the woman who could not have children began to think about the child. At dawn Lisa saw Bara returning, and Bara smiled at Lisa. It all seemed so natural. She gave Lisa water to drink and calmed her down. Tom was very happy to see the two getting along, since there is a virus infection in the resurrected people, and this virus will only spread back and forth between the reanimated. The virus is basically a goodbye to the world after infection. Lisa has not escaped either. Lisa is lying in a hospital bed and is in a coma. Tom could die at any time. There is no way out. Mike could only take this. Mike could only take this unproven vaccine and prepare to give Lisa a shot. The doctor rushed in just in time to stop Tom. The next day Lisa woke up safe and sound. Tom apologized to Lisa for almost killing her yesterday. The doctor was also very surprised that the other infected resurrected people only got worse. Lisa was the only one who healed herself, so she suddenly thought that maybe the fetus had made Lisa develop antibodies. She found Lisa and hoped to use her amniotic fluid to save these infected people, but she needed to do an amniocentesis. Lisa was kind-hearted and agreed without hesitation, but Tom's wife had a very worried look on her face. She was not worried about Lisa, but about the baby in her womb. When she returned home, she took Lisa away on Tom's behalf. Tom came back and found the diary written by his wife. It seems that this woman has imagined the fetus in Lisa's belly as her own. Tom was also shocked to see this inadvertently. He rushed to call his wife, and after a conversation with her husband, Barbara knew that her husband had read her diary, and she thought that she could not delay any longer. She was ready to perform an early cesarean section to take the fetus from her belly. At that moment she brings a glass of water with medicine to Lisa, and as Tom arrives, a car comes speeding by. Jacob's grandmother has been acting very strangely since she came back. She was even seen talking to a reanimated person 1 minute. The next minute the reanimated man disappeared. The town is buzzing with rumors. Is she hiding some secret that no one knows about? There were still many people in the town who had a lot of doubts about the existence of the resurrectionist. Jacob saw his father fighting with others because of him. He began to examine the meaning of his existence in this world. He felt that he was always causing trouble for his parents after his resurrection. He told his grandmother what was on his mind. Grandma took him to the place where he used to play when he was a child. The old parents who found Jacob missing were very anxious. They were even more worried when they found out that Jacob was with his grandmother, because everyone knew that Grandma had made a resurrected man disappear instantly. Finally they found the 2 grandchildren in an abandoned cow sheet back home. Jacob told his mother that he had thought of leaving this world, but he thought of his parents and was very sad to leave. Because of this incident, the 2 brothers have prejudice against their grandmother. The grandmother did not want to return to her home. She went to a place where the government was taking care of the reincarnated. People here had heard that this old man could make the reanimated disappear instantly, so they avoid her. At that moment, Agent Mike saw a strange man on the street. The man claimed to be able to bring back the dead. The old lady prayed to the man. The man told her to put her hand on the book. Then the old lady turned around and her partner was miraculously revived. The crowd was also applauded. Then Mike found the man.
Just remember this. You keep conning people. I have the power to send you somewhere you don't want to go. What do I have to do to make you believe?
But when Mike returned to the police station, Jacob's father came to his side to thank. He was able to bring his son back to him. But in the blink of an eye, the old father disappeared. The sound of cars honking outside the police station. When the 2 men went outside, they found the old man lying in the car with a heart attack, not breathing. Jacob's mother heard about the man's ability to bring the dead back to life, so they approached the man for help. The man asks them to bring Agent Mike to him. This time he wants to convince Mike. The man asks Mike to shoot himself. This will allow him to enter the other world and bring Jacob's father back. Mike thinks he's a psychopath and turns around to leave.
I've never killed a man before. It's the damnedest thing.
The next day, the old father was miraculously revived with him. On the other hand, the wife who learned of Tom's death did not kill Lisa, but the next morning, the government took care of the resurrection of the place. They looked out the window and their bodies were stiff and their eyes were dull, like a walking corpse. And in the town, all the reanimated were walking in one direction. Finally, they stopped at Lisa's building. The fetus in Lisa's belly upstairs was also very restless. She was awakened by the pain and opened the curtains. And downstairs was full of reanimators. Uncle Sheriff fired a shot into the sky. They just woke up. Mike, in order to know what the hell is going on, he took the man to Lisa's room, and when the man saw the pregnant Lisa, he seemed to understand why. The key to controlling the resurrectionist is the fetus in Lisa's belly. He thought that the baby would be born as a demon to control the reanimator, so the child cannot be kept. So he used Mike to enter the government department that regulates the reanimated. He found Grandma Jacob, who could make the reanimator disappear. In order to get out with less hassle, the man created a poisoning incident. With the people outside the resurrection returned, then Mike also learned the man's real purpose. He rushed to call the doctor. Let the doctor send Lisa to Jacob's house to hide. And at that moment all this was watched by Grandma. She told the man the way to make the reanimated disappear. Then the man led a large number of reanimated people to the floor of Jacob's house. The sheriff's uncle calls the police for help, but the police station was already occupied by the reanimated and could not support them. The men saw that the negotiation failed, ready to break in. Then the sound of footsteps outside the house was like a zombie siege. Because of the number of people several people simply cannot resist. They had to let the resurrectionists tie themselves up. The men went upstairs and gave Lisa a lecture. Lisa was in a trance and almost believed the man's words. Good, and the grandmother found conscience. Untied Mike came to stop all this. Finally the child was born successfully. At that time, there were a lot of people coming back from the dead all over the world. A year later, the government set up a special department for resurrectionists, and Mike, as the minister, to manage the resurrection of these people, returned one after another. The man in the prison is warning Mike to get ready. The end of the world is coming. The camera then goes to the room of Lisa's child. A large group of cicada shed attached to the window, and the play ends here. First I didn't know what the meaning of this drama was. In the end, I thought maybe it was to tell us, to those who have passed away and never had a chance to say goodbye to their loved ones, if you were given another chance, what would you say to them? I'd like to thank all my friends for their support.